Christy asks, when high-speed mixing, is it necessary to allow the glaze to sit for some period of time before dipping to avoid tiny bubbles? Yeah, the tiny bubbles. So any high-speed mixer, a couple people were asking about a milk frother, if that's an appropriate glaze mixer. I mean, I wouldn't want, I don't know. I've never used a milk frother for like making lattes or whatever. Um, I I can't really say. The bubbles that come from, like, I don't know if a milk frother is going to create more bubbles in a glaze, but I do know that I have labored over removing bubbles like after the glazing process, and I have all these bubbles that are popping on the surface of the glaze. And I've spent so much time like with my finger rubbing out these bubbles, trying to make it smooth. And then one day I was like, I wonder if all of this effort is really doing anything. So then I just left all of the popped bubbles. And what I learned was if your glaze is properly melted, it should all smooth over. So those bubbles, I mean, I'm sure there's a case where excessive bubbling could lead to some pinholes or blistering, but I think that once the glaze is in a melted state, all of those bubbles kind of disappear and pop as the glaze is liquefying on your pots during the firing. So what I did was I had this glaze that was really bubbly after mixing, and so I dipped some test tiles and I took pictures of them before the firing, and then I left the bubbles there, and then I took pictures after, and there was no evidence after the firing of the bubbles, and so then I just stopped rubbing all the bubbles. It was just, I deemed it unnecessary. I know that at the rec center, our Shino glaze, I think it might have to do with soluble materials that cause bubbling, but our Shino glaze has a lot of soda ash in it, which we dissolve in hot water before adding it to the glaze bucket. And when we high speed mix the Shino glaze in particular, we get a lot of bubbling, and those bubbles never show up after the firing. It all just melts and blends together. Okay, from Anne. Regarding mixing and stirring, for store-bought pints, is shaking the bottle bad to mix it? I have never worked with store-bought pints of glaze. I can't see why shaking it would be bad. Seems like that would do the job. I can see why it would be hard to get like an immersion blender in there, and that might be why people are asking about the milk frothers, because it's like a teeny tiny little spinny thing that would fit into a small narrow mouth jar. I don't see any problem with shaking the bottle, but I've never tried it, so take that as you will. I don't have experience with that. Should it be stirred instead? I think shaking it should be fine. But all I can say is test shaking it, see if maybe it's like super bubbly or something and the bubbles bother you. But I think that for store-bought pints that are meant for brushing, they contain CMC gum generally, or some sort of binder that helps them to kind of stay mixed. And I think mixed, like stirring them, should be just fine for brushing. I think it's dipping glazes that are more likely to settle out where the water rises to the top. But again, I just don't have experience with those types of glazes. But I'm gonna say, like, I would try shaking it, because that sounds really easy to do. Give it a good shake and see if it's fine. Just do a test, and if it's fine, then it should be fine.